If you're dealing with hip or knee pain when you play pickleball, here are just a few movements you can add to your dynamic warm-up before you go out and play on the courts. So the first thing you want to do is warm up your muscles by doing your basic marching. I always like to start just by getting the blood pumping this way. If you're dealing with pain in your hips, a lot of times it has to do with your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, and if you're dealing with your knees, because those muscles connect the two of them, we're wanting to do motions that combine both of them. So oftentimes what I will start with is a dynamic stretch where I'm warming up the hamstrings with my knee straight, my toe pulled up, and I'm just lifting my leg up and down to the point of awareness. I'm not wanting to hold a big long stretch or try to throw my leg way up high in the air. So I'm adding this dynamic hamstring stretch. I'll also pair this with a hip stretch, bringing one leg back behind and keeping my trunk upright and tall so that I'm getting a stretch across the front of my hip for my hip flexors. These are especially important, these two sets of muscles, if you do a lot of sitting, because when we're here, it shortens these muscles in the back and shortens these muscles in the front. So doing dynamic hamstring and hip flexor stretches are going to be one key stretch for you if you're dealing with hip pain. If you're dealing with knee pain, it can also help with stretching out those muscles there. But after you stretch, you want to wake up those muscles so they know that you're doing the activity. This is where I add in some of those steps going around the clock from 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock and 11 to 2 and 10, so on and so forth, 3 and 9, 4 and 8, 5 and 7, and then 6 and 6 in the back. Those can all start warming up those muscles. If you deal with pain on the sides of your hip, outside or inside, I also like to add in bringing your hip out to the side. Notice how I'm not hiking my hip up. I'm focusing on moving just from my legs when I'm moving my hip out to the side. And ideally, you want to be feeling this right in the glutes, kind of on the sides of your hips, as opposed to in the sides of your trunk or in your back. These can wake up those muscles that we need for your hips and your knees when they've had, they need a warming up period in order to get back out onto the courts. If you have the motion available to you, I also like to encourage people to explore the range of motion they have available, bringing their knees up, hips up, moving it out to the side, trying to open up their hips this way, bringing that hip back and behind them with their knee. If you have trouble with balance, always do this next to a fence in order to help with your balance. And a lot of times when balance is challenged, that's one of the reasons why we end up with hip and knee pains. So we've had a dynamic hamstring stretch, a quad and hip flexor stretch. We've had some dynamic strengthening activities for the sides of your hips and controlling in different motions, and then making sure we're clearing whatever motion we have available to your hips as well. These are also exercises you can do while you are cooling down after playing pickleball, especially if you know you get sore after you've played the sport. Having this transition period to cool down is also very important. Now, if you are the type of person to get really, really tight quads and it's not so much pain up here, you can go into a quad stretch where you're maybe hanging onto something or standing right here and bringing your foot up behind you like this. This tends to be pretty challenging for some people who maybe had like hip or knee replacements or are very, very stiff in those areas. So I like to come down towards a lunge position or getting a chair behind you, putting your foot up on the chair and bringing that leg back behind you with your knee bent. Sometimes it's harder to find a chair or something like that when you're by the courts. So that's one that I will often have people do once they get back home or before they leave home, unless there's a park bench right next door to your courts. But that's also a bonus one that you can do if you have the equipment to help you out. But other than that, give those a try and see if they help you provide a little more relief to your hips and knees during and after you play pickleball. If you have any additional questions, feel free to leave a comment or reach out, and we'll see you on the courts.